Welcome to This Explainer. I'm really thrilled to guide you through a fascinating and honestly incredibly relevant topic today. Imagine, if you will, living in a quiet, super peaceful neighborhood for decades. You know the kind. You've gotten so comfortable that you've totally stopped locking your doors at night, and maybe you've even let your home insurance policy lapse. But then, out of nowhere, a few houses down the street catch fire. Then another one on the exact next block. What's your immediate reaction? Well, you start checking your smoke detectors, you upgrade your locks, you go out and buy fire extinguishers. Right now, on a massive, global scale, this is exactly what's happening with the world's nations. We are witnessing an absolutely historic surge in military spending and a massive shift toward global rearmament.
And that neighborhood analogy brings us perfectly to the core question we're going to unpack today. Is World War III coming, or is the world just buying insurance? Look, with military alliances getting stronger, armies expanding, and governments stockpiling weapons, it is incredibly easy to assume the absolute worst. But we have to ask, are these nations genuinely preparing for an imminent global conflict, or are they simply upgrading their national home security systems because the global neighborhood suddenly feels a whole lot more unpredictable? That is the exact puzzle we're going to solve together.
To do that, here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at why the world is rearming. Second, superpowers shifting their strategies. Third, the global domino effect. Fourth, the new digital battlefield. And finally, preparing for peace or war. Let's get right into it.
Okay, part one. Why the world is rearming. To really understand where we're going, we kind of have to look back at how our foundational assumptions about global peace have shifted, and I mean shifted dramatically in just a few short years. For decades right after the Cold War ended, the global vibe was incredibly optimistic. Large-scale wars between major powers, people thought those were a thing of the past. Nations happily cashed in on what was called the peace dividend, significantly slashing their defense budgets. But today's reality is a completely stark contrast. We're seeing record military spending across the globe. Governments aren't assuming long-term peace anymore. They are actively preparing for a world where tomorrow could look very different and vastly more dangerous than today. They are definitely checking those metaphorical smoke detectors.
So, what specifically caused this massive shift? What are the actual house fires in our global neighborhood? Well, first, the Russia-Ukraine war completely shattered the illusion of perpetual peace in Europe. Then, you've got the growing, highly complex tensions between China and Taiwan. Add to that the deeply entrenched and volatile conflicts in the Middle East. And finally, you have these modern, almost invisible threats, the incredible rise of cyber warfare, and the frantic race for artificial intelligence and autonomous drones. Suddenly, governments everywhere looked at these catalysts and started asking a really terrifying question. Wait, what if we're not prepared? Which brings us to part two, superpowers shift their strategies.
You know, when the world gets dangerous, the biggest players always react first. We need to look specifically at what kind of insurance the global superpowers are buying to protect their interest right now. Let's start with the United States. No country spends more on defense than the U.S. They operate hundreds of bases worldwide. They possess an unmatched Navy and Air Force. But Washington is increasingly concerned about challenges from China and Russia. So the U.S. goal isn't actually to fight a war. The whole point of all this spending is deterrence. It's to ensure their military is so incredibly overwhelming that nobody even wants to start a war with them in the first place.
And to achieve that deterrence, the U.S. is basically buying the ultimate smart home security system. They are pouring massive investments into advanced missiles, really complex artificial intelligence systems, impenetrable cybersecurity, space capabilities, and next-generation military tech. They're trying to make absolutely sure their security system is so advanced that potential adversaries won't even think about testing the perimeter.
Meanwhile, the extraordinary scale and speed of China's military transformation is completely reshaping the map. Over the last 2 decades, Beijing hasn't just updated its military. It has rapidly modernized it across literally every single domain. Their navy has expanded dramatically so they can project power much further from their shores, their missile capabilities have been significantly improved, and, just like the US, they are making incredibly heavy investments in the future of conflict, specifically cyber warfare and artificial intelligence.
Now, a major driver of this military posture centers right around Taiwan, which brings us to two fundamentally different viewpoints. From China's perspective, Taiwan is considered a part of its territory. Conversely, from Taiwan's perspective, it views itself as entirely self-governing. We are simply laying out the facts of these differing views here, but it is precisely this deep disagreement that makes the Taiwan Strait one of the absolute most sensitive and critical geopolitical flashpoints of the entire 21st century.
Moving on to part 3, the global domino effect.
Because here's the thing. When superpowers like the US and China intensely modernize and prep like this, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It causes a massive ripple effect across the globe. The biggest domino to fall recently was obviously in Eastern Europe. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shocked a huge part of the world because it proved a pretty terrifying reality. Large-scale conventional warfare, we're talking tanks rolling across borders, massive artillery barrages, is still entirely possible today. It forced military planners literally everywhere to wake up. They are now intensely studying this conflict for crucial lessons on the importance of drones, real-time intelligence systems, the absolute necessity of robust logistics, and just how critical economic resilience is when a war drags on for a long time.
And it's fascinating to look at how these lessons are triggering reactions all over the map. In Europe, which is a region that actively reduced defense spending for years, the trend has sharply reversed. Germany is making historic investment increases, Poland is rapidly expanding its armed forces, and NATO cooperation is stronger than it has been in years. Over in the Middle East, a region full of vital shipping lanes and long-standing rivalries, countries are heavily upgrading missile defense, drones, and cyber capabilities. And they aren't doing this because they want a global war, but because uncertainty is just the new normal. And look at India, one of the fastest-growing powers in the world. Their reaction involved a super heavy focus on domestic defense manufacturing for self-reliance, alongside major naval expansion and advanced fighter jets. Literally everyone, everywhere is buying upgraded locks for their doors.
Let's dive into part 4, the new digital battlefield.
So we've talked a lot about missiles and navies, but the very nature of conflict is shifting away from traditional battlefields entirely. If a major global conflict breaks out tomorrow, you guys, it likely will not start with tanks rolling down a street. It's going to start with code. The next battlefield involves devastating cyber attacks that can completely cripple a nation's power grid. It involves artificial intelligence making split-second tactical decisions. It involves attacks on satellites in space, the manipulation of global financial systems, and information warfare that's designed to confuse and divide a population before a single shot is even fired. Modern warfare is becoming completely, 100% digital. And this brings us to a somewhat chilling reality. Dominating technology offers unimaginable advantages in modern digital warfare. Nations aren't just buying traditional weapons anymore. They are in a desperate, full-sprint race to dominate the digital realm. The countries that manage to hold the technological edge in AI, cyber capabilities, and space will possess distinct advantages that previous generations of military generals couldn't have even dreamed of. To secure their future, they have to conquer the digital space first.
Finally, part 5, preparing for peace or war.
So we've seen the massive spending, we've seen the crazy new technologies, but what is the ultimate endgame here? Well, it comes down to a fascinating concept known as the paradox of peace. This is the widespread belief held by many, many nations that building massive military strength and actively preparing for war is actually the best way to preserve peace. By making your military absolutely formidable, you actively discourage potential aggression from anyone else. It ties perfectly back to our insurance analogy from the beginning. You buy the absolute strongest, most comprehensive and expensive home security policy in the fervent, desperate hope that you will never, ever actually have to use it. History shows us that while major conflicts can emerge unexpectedly, diplomacy and economic interdependence, when they are backed by real strength, can actually prevent wars. Which leaves us with this final, profound question to consider. Are these countries actually preparing for an inevitable, catastrophic global conflict? Or are these massive, completely unprecedented military investments simply the necessary cost of doing business, the cost of maintaining peace and stability in an incredibly competitive and uncertain world? Whether these global preparations will ultimately lead to a stable balance of power or spiral into greater tension really remains one of the defining questions of our time. It's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this breakdown helped clarify what is a deeply complex issue, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning and learning about the massive forces shaping our future. See you next time.